Dr. van der Lingen, the most EU member states need to decrease their debt within the coming years. You have worked out a plan for the Dutch government to save 10 billion euro within the next 5 years. Can you tell me more about it?
This idea and this advice I would give the Dutch government has to do with sea level rise. And that's based on the idea that because of man-made global warming, sea level would rise dramatically. And the last government installed a committee to advise them on what measures to take and what they could expect, what kind of sea level rise. That was the so-called Delta Commission. The Delta Commission in turn asked a group of so-called experts to advise them on the science and what sort of levels of sea level rise they could expect. That was the Vellinga Committee. Well, their advice to the Delta Commission was rather extreme. They suggested that by 2000, I have the figures here, by 2100, you know, the level could go up between 55 and 110 centimeters. And by 2200, it would go up between 150 and 350 centimeters. But these figures were extreme and based on projected ideas of how temperature could rise. And they were based on expectation that temperature might rise 6 degrees by 2100 and 8 degrees by 2200. And that, of course, is totally out of, that's not really based on good science. But the Delta Commission accepted most of the figures from the Vellinga Committee. And they even increased them a little bit, because in the final report to the government, they said that sea level rise could be as high as between 65 and 130 centimeters. And by 2200, between 2 and 4 meters. Well, this is extreme and is really not based on good science. It's totally based on what we call non-validated computer models. Computer models, you can put anything in to get any sort of answer. And if you, for instance, look at the real world data, if you look at the Netherlands and you look at this particular graph, you see, for instance, that between 1885 and 2010, sea level in the Netherlands has only risen 1.8 millimeter per year. And that is for the greater part due to the fact that the land is sinking instead of the sea rising. And if you can see in this graph, there is no acceleration, because you would expect when temperatures are rising because of greenhouse gas emissions that sea level rise would also increase, accelerate. That's not the case at all. So we can really expect that in the coming time this will not be much different. So it will continue to increase by 1.8 millimeter per year. And if you then look at this graph and you compare the predictions by the Delta Commission between 2 and 4 meters by 2200, but if it continues the way it has always done for a long time, because in the Netherlands they already started measuring sea level rise in the 17th century, it will only has gone up 36 centimeters by 2200 and not sort of the maximum of 4 meters suggested by the Delta Commission. And the Delta Commission also suggested that the government should spend up to 2 billion euro per year up till 2050 to strengthen the water defenses, the sea defenses, so raising dikes, etc. And then after between 2050 and I think 2100, they suggest they spend 1.5 billion euro per year. Well, my advice to the government would be just postpone the advice from the Delta Commission for the time being. And what you should do, keep recording the sea level accurately what they have done since the 17th century. If, and that's a big if, all of a sudden sea level would go up, then there is time enough to still implement the advice of the Delta Commission. So by postponing the advice of the Delta Commission, the government could save €2 billion per year for the next 5 years. So that's $10 billion. And the plan of the present government is to save €18 billion in the next 5 years. So that's already $10 billion saved. And so I really would advise the Minister of Finance, Kees de Jager, to really look carefully at these figures and these data. And if he wants a second opinion, he could do no better than ask his namesake, Professor Kees de Jager, a famous astronomer from Utrecht University, to advise him, because Professor Kees de Jager, he's an astronomer, and he has recently written 2 peer-reviewed papers in which he predicts that because of the activity of the sun, or the lack of activity of the sun, we may be entering a cooling period, which could last, according to him, up to 100 years. So it's important that the government also looks not only what these people who believe in catastrophic man-made global warming, but also from others.